This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Joe Bitonio retires today. Jersey Gate, 8 Gate, whatever you want to call it, ends in a pretty sad way. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Let's start with the retirement of Joe Bitonio, and I just want to be able to talk for a few minutes about his run in Cleveland, the importance of his run, and, the significance of him being able to retire with dignity as a Cleveland Brown, and why that's important for this organization going forward, especially, after everything that's gone on over the last couple of months. So Joe Bitonio, 10-year career, crazy enough when you think about it, came in the same draft class as Johnny Manziel, who's the second worst draft pick in the first round the Cleveland Browns made in my lifetime. First worst is the guy they selected right before Johnny Manziel, which is Justin Gilbert. I still think there's a video on this channel where I talk about why I think that 2014 draft is the worst first round ever in NFL history. But what did save that draft a little bit was the selection of Joe Bitonio, the guard out of Nevada. At that point, he was actually a tackle. There was question about whether he would play tackle, whether he play guard. He slided into guard, got to play between Alex Mack and Joe Thomas, and really went on to a Hall of Fame caliber career. The thing about Joel that I don't think gets enough love is the professionalism of Joel. And especially now, it stands out, right? Because we love football players who are going to do their job and do their best to do the best that they can, no matter what the circumstances are. We talked about this with Jalen Carter. We've had this conversation with Miles, right? Where do you want guys who are good, or do you want guys who want to be here? And Joel never made you ask that question about him. Joel never made you question where his commitment was. Joel never made you question what it is that his goals are and if they're adjacent to what the team's goals are. Joel never made you question whether his goals are different than the team's goals, or if he's trying to force his own will on the team instead of playing his role, right? Joel was the ultimate team guy. And look, Joel, to be honest, has been in situations where he would have been more than right to try to shake the ship up or walk away, right? The Browns let the amazing offensive line that he was on at the beginning of his career get dismantled because of incompetence, right? They didn't want to bring back Mitchell Schwartz, and then they did want to bring back Mitchell Schwartz. They completely pissed off Alex Mack, and they let that offensive line kind of deteriorate. And then the second run, where he's on the best offensive line in football, that offensive line deteriorates too, but that's more to do with him aging than anything else. Joe was a consummate pro. Joe is, next to Nick Chubb, kind of that ideal, picture-perfect version of what you want a Cleveland Brown to be. And I hope that Joe, in a lot of ways, carried on the legacy with Joe Thomas, right? Which is, again, Joe Thomas, for his entire career, was somebody who went to work no matter what. And you never had to question his commitment. People would talk about like veteran days off and OTA practices and shit with him, but nothing serious would ever pop up with Joe Thomas, right? And Joe kind of saw Joe Thomas do that and picked up the mantle and carried it on there. And now it's Spencer Fano's turn to try to live up to that same standard, right? That's a tradition that goes back all the way to 2007 with the Browns. But the part of this that I hope the Browns as a franchise age out of is needing to be in that situation where we're just thankful somebody decided to stay because we know what they went through, right? Hopefully as this organization gets all these draft assets together, as this organization has all this young talent together, they can put together a team and an era where we're not shocked that people want to stay. As much as I love what Joe Bitonio did and much as I understand the importance of what Joe and Joe Thomas did, I hope that future Browns, Spencer Fano, is not in a situation where it's a hard decision whether he should stay or not, whether it's a question of loyalty. It should just be a practical yes. This is the best place for me, right? This is the best team for me. I hope the Browns put more players in that position, the fans not in the position to question people's loyalty. I hope the Browns get to the place to where when they have a great superstar player, we don't have to worry about them wanting to leave because the team's not competitive enough. And then having the ensuing debates about that. I hope for a better run for Spencer Fano. And look, if you look at the progression of it, Joe Thomas, no playoff games. Very little, one winning season. It's a damn shame that we made Joe Thomas go through that with that little reward. But then Joe Bitonio, multiple winning seasons, multiple playoff games. So hopefully the third time's the charm. And for Spencer Fano, he lives a bit more of a charmed life because that's what progression is, right? That's what growth is. We tend to look at growth as something that should happen instantly, but that's not how it happens. My grandfather lived a very tough life so that my dad could just live a tough life. And then my dad lived a tough life so I can live a hard life, okay? And I will live a hard life so that my kid can live a good life. It takes a while to get to where you want to get to sometimes. Sometimes the journey is multi-generational. And right now, Spencer Fano is the next in line. Hopefully, Spencer Fano, when you retire and you have a 15-year debatably Hall of Fame career, that's the hopes. We're sitting here and not saying, oh, man, I wish we did right by Spencer. I wish we put a more competitive team. I hope we're saying, man, look at that run Spencer had. One hell of a career. I hope that we don't have to, sprinkle into your retirement speech caveats about how much dysfunction you witnessed. So as much as I'm thankful of Joe Thomas and Joe Bitonio for walking and getting us to this place, I hope for the next generation we can start to run. We're going to continue on with this video, but I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a fun way to earn cash while you watch your favorite teams. No complex betting rules. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Here are my picks for this upcoming season, AFC North edition. Jimmy Bernard, I have less than 475. This has to do with volume available in Pittsburgh's offense. Quincy Judkins, I have over 975. Browns improved line. I think the run game's going to be better with it. Chase Brown, under 900 yards. Joe Burrow equals less rushing yards usually for the Bengals offense. Mark Andrews, more than 475 yards. Lamar's going to need a safety blanket. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You could follow me on the app at Quinn_C to see all my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineup to download the app using the link in the description. All right, so number gate, right? This is the whole thing that's been going on with Jared Verse and Dillon Gabriel. Now, admittedly, I think I was the first person I saw online talking about this. I don't know everybody online. I'm sure other people were tweeting about this too, other shameless equipment nerds like myself. But I saw that like Jared Verse was like getting promoted and all that as like number 8, right, on the Browns social media, which was like interesting to me because Dillon Gabriel's number 8. Now, obviously, I did a whole short about this, right, if you really want to see like how it breaks down. But the complicated part is that Dillon Gabriel can't just switch without getting a quarterback number. And right now, all the quarterback numbers are not available. Everybody's kind of holding one of the 0 through 19 numbers, and those are the only numbers that quarterbacks can wear. So Dillon Gabriel was kind of in a pickle, right? He couldn't just switch his jersey to something because somebody had to let go of their jersey number. And unfortunately, JOK is the one who let go of his jersey number. And I say unfortunately because if JOK were still healthy, if there was a plan for JOK to still play, JOK would not be giving up his jersey number, right? But he gave up number 6. That number meant a lot to JOK. The Browns have been holding that number just in hopes of JOK coming back. And this is just another sign that JOK is probably not coming back, that his career is probably over. Again, it's one of those situations where it's not necessarily about what he can do, and it's more about what he can get cleared to do, right? And that can take decades. That can take until an advancement in medical technology. You know, the good thing for JOK is that he does still have normal function, is that he still has relatively his health, and he has his youth. And, you know, he got paid when he was in Cleveland. And look, the Browns are doing right by JOK, and they're still paying JOK. So shout out to Andrew Berry for that, right? So unfortunately, JOK has to give up the number 6. Dylan Gabriel will now wear the number 6, which opens up another can of worms because obviously number 6, when it's on defense, carries a different context than when it's worn by a quarterback, a short quarterback. So, you know, he'd be the first guy to wear number 6 since Baker Mayfield. And that's interesting. I don't think he's going to be on the team by the end of camp, so I don't know if it's going to make it until that week 2 game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it certainly is something interesting because, like, they had to do something, right? Like, you know, nobody wanted to give up the jersey number. And, like, I hope that, like, JOK didn't have to submit a jersey number change and have to pay for all the stock that he has out there because, you know, I hope he got an exception. I hope the NFL used common sense there and gave him an exception. I would hate for him to have to pay for all the JOK jersey stock because you can still buy you a number 6 JOK jersey and be just okay, right? Like you could be fine wearing that around. I recommend it, right? You know, I personally only buy sports jerseys that I could get my name on the back of because they can't trade me, right? I got a Cavs jersey that has my birth year on it, number 95, and my last name on it, right? Like that's how I go with sports jerseys because like you never know what your relationship with the player is going to be like. And also you never know what these players are going to end up doing. You know what I mean? Like you might be all about what these players are doing right now, but they do something in a couple of years and you ain't trying to wear that jersey no more. And them jerseys are too expensive to simply just bet on that, right? Like I don't want to be tethered to nobody but myself when it comes to a purchase like that. Maybe I'm a cheap person, but you know, hey, look, man, cheap for a reason, right? But anyways, JOK having to give up his jersey number, man, that's heartbreaking. You know, it's a pretty heartbreaking day. You know, ironically enough, a week after this whole trade, you know, you're waving goodbye to Joe Bitonio officially. I watched his press conference and, you know, just the appreciation of what Joe brought to this team. And yeah, at the end, you know, I thought it was time for him to go. His play just wasn't what it was. His back really just went through hell from 2023 on. But, you know, so that's somebody like we talk about it all the time. If you want to build a culture, you need people in that building who give a fuck about being a Brown, right? And again, the argument for getting some people out and keeping some people in is that they didn't care about being a Brown. So bring in people who care. Obviously, you need talent to go along with that. And that's what made Joe Bitonio so important to this franchise, which is because not only did Joe care about the Cleveland Browns, he cared about Berea, but he was a great player. And that kind of stuff, right, that's the kind of stuff that you really, really want to cherish when you're trying to build a culture, right? That's why the Browns prioritize bringing in Jared Verse, because Jared Verse is a great player who they think will commit to the program. And hopefully that's the case. You know, Nick Chubb, right? Great player. That's why I think they should bring him back. He's a great player. Not at this point of his career. He's not like Nick Chubb anymore, but he's still a good player. He has the kind of history that young players are going to respect immediately. And that's somebody who cares about being a Brown, who was really heartbroken to have to leave the organization to begin with and intends to retire a Cleveland Brown if he can. I think when you have those opportunities, you should pursue those opportunities. Obviously, you don't hold the team back, and that's where we were getting with Joe Bitonio, where the play had gotten so bad that we had to move on, and he couldn't be the starter anymore, right? So it became inevitable that Joe either had to play somewhere else or retire. Same thing kind of happened with Nick Chubb, where the Browns wanted to get a new bell cow back, and it's going to be hard to get a new bell cow back with Nick Chubb still on the roster. But I think now that we've had that year off, we could bring back Nick Chubb and do that. And I think, wouldn't that be awesome for this fan base right now? Right, everything that people have seen over the last couple of weeks, you know what I mean? Wouldn't it be awesome to just sign Nick Chubb and, have him as an insurance policy for Quincy Judkins, have him as a veteran leader for that young running back room, and more importantly, for that entire team, right? Somebody who could demonstrate what the motto is and carry the torch while we try to develop other torch bearers for the organization. So, that's kind of my argument there for why I think Nick Chubb should be a Cleveland Brown, because watching that press conference and really thinking about Joe Bitonio's career just made it, to me, just feel like it doesn't make sense that Nick Chubb's not here when he's available. Not saying he needs to start, not saying you need to give him 20 carries. He might not get more than 30 carries this season. You know what I mean? He's a free agent and it's June. We know what that reality is for a running back the age of Nick Chubb. But still, I think he can be a good insurance policy. He's certainly a better insurance policy than running back on the practice squad. And certainly nobody who's available right now brings the value to the organization that Nick Chubb would bring. So, just seeing that makes me want more stories like that, because, being a Browns fan and being my particular age, I'm 31, where, I've really only got to experience this team during the expansion era. It's unfortunate because I didn't in 30 years of life, I haven't been able to see more than 2 or 3 stories like Joel's for this team, right? Lifers, guys that you have great memories with. Even with Joe Thomas, there was no playoff games with Joe Thomas. At least with Joe, we got some good playoff memories, some great regular season memories, and I just want this team to provide more of that. And I also want this team to kind of continue to commemorate those things, especially when it makes sense roster-wise, which I think it does. But that's my thoughts on those two things. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. You have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.